are, who we were, and who we're destined to become are all reflections of the stories we tell, of gods and devils from tales of the heart to those of fear and foreboding. Stories shape us in the world we live in. Myths, folk tales, and even religious parables all define our cultures and beliefs. In each episode of Faith and Fear, we will dip our toes into the comparative narratives spanning the globe, considering the concepts and archetypes common to us all. And lay shalom and prazir, hello and peace. It's a pleasure. Thanks for following me down the rabbit hole once again on my journey to better understand the stories and beliefs that shape us. As always, you've been missed. Please try to remember that what they believe, as well as what they do and cause you to endure, does not testify to your inferiority, but to their inhumanity. James Baldwin. Last episode, we talked about the concept of love and discussed a number of deities who govern many of the aspects of such, including fertility, marriage, and family. This week, I want to change directions and focus on the specific topics of gender identity, the spectrum of sexuality, as well as the existence of those same themes throughout mythology and some of the world's many pre-Christian cultures. First and foremost, I want to establish that I myself am a cisgendered, heterosexual male. If you do not know what that means, after today, you will. Secondly, as someone who identifies as such, I recognize my privilege and wish to openly express that much of what I will be discussing today is outside of my normal purview. If I misunderstand or misinterpret any of the information I share, please feel free to let me know. Also, I want to make it clear where I stand. I am ignorant to much of the world, especially that which exists outside of my limited direct experience. But I consider myself an ally to all those who live with love and tolerance. Who you love and who you identify as doesn't matter to me. I only care that you choose consenting, of proper age partners, and that you live with the same compassion and consideration for others as you yourself desire to receive. There is much I do not know, and only so much about others we can directly comprehend, but I am open to learning. I desire to learn in order to understand those with varying backgrounds who live different lives from my own. My goal as a writer is to promote that same desire and drive towards compassion and understanding in others. We are all human. We make mistakes. We misread and push back against things that are unfamiliar to us. But I firmly believe that with patience and an open mind, we can move forward together. Thank you for your patience and understanding. Considering tonight's topic, I felt it was something I needed to say. Now, on with the show. There are a few things I want to go over and explain that will be relevant to the figures and deities I will be discussing. According to the World Health Organization, gender refers to the characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed. This includes norms, behaviors, and roles associated with being a woman, man, girl, or boy, as well as relationships with each other. As a social construct, gender varies from society to society and can change over time. Contrary to what many of us grow up believing, there are cultures who celebrate non-binary gender spectrums, acknowledging not just male and female, but third or more genders as well. This is often incorrectly conflated with anatomical sex, which includes the genitalia, hormones, chromosomes, and other biological features. To continue further, it may be pertinent to address some of the other relevant terminology associated with gender. Gender identity describes how someone perceives themselves internally. This is a person's innermost perception of who they really are, as male, female, neither, or both. Gender expression is how someone outwardly expresses their gender. This can entail a person's body language, clothing, voice, and social behavior. Gender fluid is just that, someone who does not exclusively identify as male or female. A gender fluid person may express themselves as male or female interchangeably. Cisgender, the term I used earlier to describe myself, basically means that I identify with the gender I was assigned at birth. I was assigned male at birth and continue to do so. Intersex is a term with a wide range of meaning. At one time, the term hermaphrodite was used, but for various reasons it has fallen out of favor. Intersex is a complicated biological term, so I'm going to quote the site directly. Intersex people are born with a variety of differences in their sex traits and reproductive anatomy. There is a wide variety of difference among intersex variations, including differences in genitalia, chromosomes, gonads, internal sex organs, hormone production, hormone response, and/or secondary sex traits. There are a number of deities and spiritual beings who identify as and are perceived as being intersex, anatomically neither male nor female, or a combination of both. A non-binary person does not identify as male or female. They may perceive themselves as a combination of both, or choose to exist outside of the binary spectrum altogether. Non-binary is sometimes used as an umbrella term, inclusive of, but not limited to, those who identify as transgender, agender, bigender, genderqueer, as well as gender fluid individuals. Transgender individuals may identify themselves in a number of ways. Typically, they are of a gender expression other than what they were assigned at birth. That said, they are not confined to any one sexual orientation, identifying as straight, gay, bisexual, or any of the above. Sexuality, or sexual orientation, refers to the pervasive emotional, romantic, and/or sexual attraction to other people. Some terminology relevant to sexuality and orientation include the term asexual, which refers to a person who does not typically possess a sexual attraction or desire for anyone. A bisexual person is someone who is emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to a number of sexes, genders, or gender identities. This can be to varying degrees and is not always at the same time. Bisexual is occasionally used interchangeably with the term pansexual. The colloquial term gay is defined as someone who is attracted to members of the same gender. It is sometimes used by men, women, as well as non-binary individuals. The term lesbian describes a woman who finds herself attracted to other women. This can be sexually and/or emotionally. Sometimes used interchangeably with the term bisexual, a pansexual person may be emotionally or sexually attracted to an individual of any gender identity. Basically, the differences between gender and sex, or sexual orientation, comes down to this. Gender is how a person identifies. It is personal. Sex, on the other hand, is interpersonal and revolves around who a person is, emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to. There are a lot of other terms for those outside of the LGBTQ plus community many may not understand. Unfortunately, we don't really have time to cover everything. Still, there were a few key points I wanted to hit, all of which I retrieved from hrc.org, the Human Rights Campaign's website. Other general terms include ally, which is typically used to describe someone who is not a part of the LGBTQ community, but openly supports them. It's also used to describe those within the community who support a member of a different aspect, an example being a bisexual person who is an ally to the transgender community. The term queer is a reclaimed word often used as an umbrella term to denote anyone who identifies outside of mainstream gender identities and sexual orientations. Some people choose to use this as a non-specific identifier for themselves. A great resource often used by a good therapist friend of mine is genderbread.org. She actually suggested it for this episode. They do a much better job of breaking down this information with their model of a genderbread person as a teaching tool. Link in the show notes. Now that many of the terms and concepts have been explained, I feel we can more comfortably explore the significance of some of these same concepts in history and mythology. Contrary to what many may choose to believe, they are not new and have existed pretty much since humanity has under different names and with varying cultural influence. From Narcissus to Achilles, from Zeus to Hercules, and from Pan to Dionysus, many of the Greek heroes as well as gods took same-sex lovers. It would honestly be an exhausting bit of research that would require an episode all its own to fully discuss. Suffice it to say, ancient Greece was very open about sexuality, and a number of Greek figures are considered LGBTQ icons. One of the more significant stories involves the abduction of Ganymede. In this tale, the mortal Ganymede was one of the most beautiful men in all of the human world. He, just like so many others, caught the eye of Zeus, who fell in love with the mortal man's beauty. The king of the Greek gods then transformed Ganymede into an eagle before abducting him, choosing the man to be his cupbearer on Mount Olympus. The god Pan is well known for his romances with both men and women, having numerous statues depicting him with lovers of all genders. The story of the suspected lesbian lovers, Callisto and the goddess Artemis, like many Greek tales, has an unfortunate ending. After Callisto is turned into a bear, Artemis nearly kills her unwittingly before Zeus intervenes, turning the she-bear into the constellation Ursa Major, which can still be seen in the sky of the northern hemisphere today. There are also the Amazons who, living in a land free of men, were believed to only have heterosexual intercourse once or twice a year with male slaves, and only in order to reproduce. However, some argue that a dominant lesbian culture having existed for the remainder of the year is purely speculation and modern fantasy. In India, the great temples of Khajuraho and Mughal contain numerous carvings of homosexual and group sex, celebrating all forms of romantic and sexual love that was prevalent long before things were changed after the arrival of the British. The ancient Egyptian tomb of, excuse my pronunciation, Niankhkhnum and Khnumhotep, believed to be male lovers, were entombed together in the necropolis of Saqqara. Whether or not the pair were actually lovers or brothers is debated by some. However, their embracing depictions seem to leave more towards being evidence of the former. Neferkare, an Egyptian king, is stated to have had the interesting habit of visiting one of his generals well into the night. The general, named Sasenet, was said to do, quote, what his majesty desired, end quote, was one of several indications of a sexual love affair. The bisexual polytheistic relationship of Agni, the fire god, had the god being married to the goddess Svaha as well as the moon god Soma. An iconic same-sex couple from Vedic literature is that of Mitra and Varuna, deities connected with the sun and often associated with the phases of the moon, each representing two halves, the waning and waxing moons respectively. The two were often depicted together riding various animals, often a shark, crocodile, or even a chariot led by a flock of 7 swans. Their sexual acts were said to produce the moon's next phase. From Chinese mythology, and one of the deities I vaguely skimmed over last week, Er Shen was the god said to govern homosexual love and marriage. To elaborate, Er Shen is the rabbit god who was born of a tragic death. The story goes that, as a mortal man, he had fallen in love with an officer. When he professed his feelings, knowing it was considered sinful to have such feelings, the officer killed him where he stood. In the afterlife, the gods of the underworld felt for Er Shen, giving him the position of rabbit god and role over watching others like himself. His temple would eventually become a sanctuary for other homosexuals. One of the earliest stories of an intersex person involves the Greek Hermaphroditus, who was the child of Hermes and Aphrodite. They eventually caught the attention of a young nymph who, falling in love with Hermaphroditus, petitioned the gods that they be forever together as one. Greek art often depicts the intersex figure as a person with male genitalia and a woman's breasts. From ancient Phrygia, what is now a part of Asian Turkey, came the intersex goddess Agdistis, who was born from the accidental impregnation of Mother Earth by the sleeping Sky Father. The story goes that the other gods feared the existence of a double-gendered deity, so took it upon themselves to castrate Agdistis. It was this act that created the primal goddess of nature, Cybele. The god of creation in Egyptian mythology, Atum, was believed to be both male and female. Giving birth to intersex offspring, separate genders didn't actually begin to exist until several generations had passed, with the birth of the male goddess Osiris and the female goddess Isis. Potentially the first record of a transgender individual, Hatshepsut identified as female but was typically depicted in men's clothing and wore the title of king. One of her descendants even tried to remove historical references of her, which they thankfully failed. The intersex god of the Egyptian Nile was a male deity of fertility who was often depicted with a beard and breasts, representing both male and female reproductive power. The transgender tale of the Egyptian Iphis tells of a person who was assigned female at birth, but grew up as a male in lieu of an actual male heir. When Iphis fell in love with the female Ianthe, Iphis prayed to Isis at one of her temples for aid. Isis answered his prayers, transitioning Iphis to being physically male. The Hindu goddess of chastity and fertility, Bahuchara Mata, and her sisters were accosted by the bandit Bapia. Refusing to die, Bahuchara cut off her own breasts as well as the breasts of her sisters, cursing their assailant. Bapia suffered impotence until he humbly paid homage to Bahuchara by dressing and acting like a woman. Hijras are eunuchs, intersex people, and transgender individuals who view Bahuchara Mata as their originator and patron. They are also considered to be a third gender. In this particular part of India's culture, the breasts are representative of womanhood, so to remove them essentially means to become neither male or female, a hijra. The Hindu story of Shikhandi tells the tale of a warrior who was assigned female at birth, but went on to have their gender switched to male by a Yaksha spirit, establishing himself as a war hero before eventually dying in battle. Lord Vishnu has taken on many forms and can be more or less be described as gender fluid. Incarnated as Mohini, she became a divinely beautiful enchantress whose femininity and supernatural powers were said to overcome even the likes of Lord Shiva, one of the supreme gods of the Hindu pantheon. An irreverent tale still celebrated today, especially in the village of Kuflagam, it is said that Mohini married the god Arvan. Within a single day after the two wed, Arvan dies, leaving Mohini to mourn in his wake. Mohini's mourning is still reenacted during the celebration as a part of an 18-day festival put on by the transgender community. The Hindu deity Ardhanarishvara is an intersex god who is considered androgynous, but typically described and depicted as being split down the middle, one half being male and the other female. Their name is translated as the Lord who is half woman. There are several other Hindu and Indian deities who are significant to some of the LGBTQ+ community, far too many to go into detail with. That said, I feel it is fairly clear that historically, they've had a more open mind when it comes to the concepts of gender and sexuality. In the Philippines, the Tagalog story of Lakapati tells of the transgender goddess of fertility who played a significant role in the creation of the world. She, a goddess full of kindness, noticed that her lover, the supreme god Bathala, also transgender, was feeling empty and sought to cheer him up. Molding him a ball of clay, Lakapati gave it to him, and he, becoming so enamored with his gift, began adding details to it, carving in rivers and forming mountains. When Bathala was done, Lakapati recognized how amazingly beautiful his work was. Putting it in a place that could easily be seen, she placed it in the sky, naming it Earth. Today, she is still considered a protector of the LGBTQ+ community. The Philippines continue to be one of the most accepting places of the LGBTQ people, transgender women having been common and openly accepted historically. Among the 8 immortals of Chinese mythology, Lan Caihe is an androgynous figure, often appearing as a young boy or girl in genderless clothing. They are described as carrying a bamboo basket and are tied to both male and female musicians. Lan Caihe allegedly ascended to heaven, flying on the back of either a swan or a crane. The Norse Ymir is considered a primordial intersex being who gave birth to both a male and female from the pits of his arms no less, as well as a 6-headed being from his legs, all of which he produced asexually. Oh, Loki, where do I begin with the Norse god Loki? Loki was a bit all over the place and is considered to be gender fluid, non-binary, and basically pansexual. As a trickster deity, there are numerous stories of Loki taking on many forms as a part of his scheme. He has taken on the guise of a woman, seducing male lovers, and even given birth after transforming into a mare and mating with a stallion. The Aztec god Shen was said to have often had sexual intercourse with a number of male gods and mortals. However, some of the associated practices and resulting traditions are considered less than ideal today. The Navajo role of Nadle, meaning changing ones, is a title that refers to intersex individuals. The Nadle were often valued as those capable of seeing both sides of any situation and maintain the role of mediator. They were also considered to be especially gifted at healing, possessing a significant level of magic energy. The Native American concept of two-spirit represents men, women, as well as intersex individuals who are often considered neither male or female, as they possess traits and perform duties of both. Two-spirit people were considered a part of a third, separate gender. Though specifics sometimes varied among different tribes, some even designated a different name for two-spirit, males and females, they did share a number of relatively consistent traits. Two-spirit people often held specialized roles within their tribe, expressed some form of gender variation, and were believed to possess a stronger spiritual connection or presence, often taking on the responsibilities of a healer, shaman, and even ceremonial leaders. Several tribes even considered two-spirits to be blessed when it came to love, even able to bestow such upon lovers. Many typical held same-sex relationships with non-two-spirit people, and though the term two-spirit is not the same gender-variant term used by every indigenous community, it has become one to rally behind by a great number of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Native Americans. The intersex god Mawu-Lisa of the Dahomey people in West Africa is the combined body of the brother and sister twins Mawa and Lisa, who represented the sun and moon respectively. The female half, Mawu, was the goddess of the moon, while her brother Lisa was the god of the sun, and together they were in charge of creation. In Mozambique, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, the supreme creator of the Shona people, Ware, is the loving god who rules over the forces of earth and life itself. Ware is understood as being an intersex deity, both male and female or neither. Haitian voodoo is said to be relatively open to those of all sexual orientation, so the acts of the Loa known as Ghede Nibo does not come to be much of a surprise. Once an attractive young human man, Ghede Nibo died a violent death and was adopted by Baron Samde and Mama Brigitte. He is typically described as effeminate, dressed in drag, or donning a black coat, and it is said that those he possesses during ritual are often inspired to partake in all manner of different sexual activities. A patron of all those who die young, Ghede Nibo is an adept healer who carries a special bottle of rum that is blended with medicinal herbs. In the Hausa language of northern Nigeria, the term Nya Dadu, translated to effeminate men, refers to men who are somewhat socially ambivalent and sexually ambiguous in their identity. They are considered to be wives of men, male sex workers who perform homosexual acts but are not necessarily homosexual themselves. Similarly to the cultural position of the Nandi people, women without children sometimes serve as female husbands, taking on male duties, and it is considered by some researchers that both serve as necessary roles among their particular societies. This is, of course, according to a heteronormative perspective which may be altogether lacking. Lastly, the Tanala people of Madagascar have a term called Sorumbave, which refers to a third gender similar to that of the Native American two-spirit. The men are considered to have a feminized role, dressing in women's clothing and performing women's duties, often stated as embodying feminine characteristics at birth. There are actually several other figures, quite a few actually, worth mentioning, but as I've said, I had to limit who I cover. Still, I feel as though we've gone over a lot this week, and I know in many ways the episode is a great deal heavier than previous ones. The point is, I hope you stuck it out and learned something. I know I did. That's part of the reason I started this podcast in the first place. Not just to educate others, but to educate myself. In other words, we're learning together, and we're only just getting started. Next time, we're going to dial it back just a little to a lighter topic. With spring just on the horizon here in the Northern Hemisphere, I've decided it'd be fun to explore mythology around the seasons, as well as a few nature deities. For now, assalamu alaikum and namaste. Peace be with you until we meet again. Thanks for listening to me as I've nerded out about stories and beliefs. Join me next time as I journey down the rabbit hole once again by subscribing and listening wherever podcasts are available. Leave me a comment on iTunes. 5-star reviews are always great and help others find the podcast. Also, you can email me at faithandfearpodcast@gmail.com. And lastly, share with others you feel may enjoy or get something out of these conversations. Who knows, maybe then we'll be one step closer to glimpsing the true nature of faith and fear. Music brought to you from Pixabay.